Hi, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I am so glad you are here today. Today, I want to talk about building relationships that matter. I believe that relationships are the foundation of everything. It is imperative that you have good relationships as a leader, as an individual contributor, as a parent, as a community member. Relationships are everything. And as leaders, when we invest in meaningful connections, we earn trust, respect, and when we have great relationships at work, it makes work more fun, more meaningful, and more fulfilling. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today as we are embarking on 2025, imploring you to really focus on relationships this year. There have been so many ups and downs over this last half a decade, and people are feeling lonely. They are feeling anxiety. They are suffering from mental health issues. And people want to have more than just a paycheck at their jobs. And the biggest way to do that is to have relationships because we all want to feel connected. We all want to feel valued. We all want to be trusted. And none of that happens without relationships. And building relationships is something that happens over time. I love this quote by Lincoln Chaffee that says, "Trust is built with consistency." And that is absolutely true. We leaders have to show up consistently, building that trust, building those relationships if we want to build great teams and build great companies where people are inspired to show up again for more than just a paycheck. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. We're going to talk about why workplace relationships are crucial. We're going to talk about how you can build stronger relationships with your team, your peer, your boss, and what to do when you have a relationship that is struggling or is damaged. So let's dive in. So let's start with why workplace relationships matter. We all know that the foundation of trust and respect is relationships. Strong relationships create psychological safety. When we have a good relationship with our boss, with our peer, we're more likely to say what we think, to give feedback, to share our opinion, to make a mistake. And when there is this foundation of trust and mutual respect, people feel valued and they feel secure enough to take risks, to innovate. And that is what we're all looking for as leaders. So, that foundation of trust and respect is incredibly important. And you can't do that if you don't have strong relationships because those relationships create that type of psychological safety. And it really matters. Teams with high trust are 50% more productive, according to a study done by Harvard Business Review. That is so meaningful. And that's not just the statistics, right? Why are people more productive when they are trusted, when they have good relationships at work? Because they're not dealing with workplace drama. How much time does workplace drama take away from actually getting things done? Dealing with conflict, dealing with gossip, dealing with people who are disengaged and unhappy because they don't like the people who they work with. So it really matters. Another reason why strong workplace relationships matter is that it allows for meaning and fulfillment at work. And I know that a lot of leaders might not care about this, but every single one of your employees do, and you should too. Let's face it, you want meaning and fulfillment in your work. So why shouldn't every single person on your team, every single person in your company feel the same way? Meaningful connections lead to increased engagement, job satisfaction, and retention. And let's face it, when we have people who aren't happy in their jobs, they're not doing as good of a job, when we have people who are leaving your team or your company, that is a pain in the butt because you have to recruit, you have to train. It's so costly. And besides all those work statistics, we want happy employees because when we have happy employees, they go home to their families and they have happier families, which make for happier communities. It really is this ripple effect that meaning and fulfillment in the workplace really has. And it just makes work more fun when you show up every day going like, I like the people who I work with. I have a great relationship with my boss. Can trust my peers. I understand where the company is going and I have faith in the company. That brings fulfillment and meaning in work. And then finally, why relationships in the workplace matter is that it has an impact on your effectiveness as a leaders. Leaders who invest in relationships inspire loyalty and they create more cohesive teams. I know this to be true from firsthand experience. I spend so much time building relationships with my team, and we get so many things done. And we work through so many issues that come up because that's what we do at work. We solve problems, whether they're self induced or they're a problem that we're trying to solve for our market or for our customers. And so when you have that cohesive team, people are more likely to invest in problem solving. And I'll just give you a recent example to help make this a little bit more concrete. So we are getting ready to roll out our strategic plan for 2025 to the company. And we're really talking about how do we, as an executive management team, talk about strategy? How do we make sure that our teams are executing, that we are executing, but that we don't get so lost in the details of execution that we forget to step back and look at the big picture and say, okay, are we doing the right things? Is there something that happened that would make us need to shift our thinking? Are we missing anything? And this is something that every team struggles with, making sure that you don't lose the big picture as you are focused on the goals. And we had this really fantastic conversation at our weekly leadership meeting recently to talk about how we go about doing this. And there are some very strong opinions because we have very different people on the team. We have people like me who always want to be in the big picture and who just want to let the teams execute the details. And then you have people on the team who have excellent project management talents who want to really focus on execution. So, how do you figure out a system and a way to communicate that works for both? We had this really fantastic conversation around how to go about doing this. And everybody felt safe to speak up, to say what they thought, and to push back when they thought that the team was missing a key point. None of this would happen if there isn't strong workplace relationships. And that's not just a relationship with me, it's a relationship with each other. And so we came up with a great solution. And I had every single one of my executive team members come up to me afterwards and say, hey, that was one of the best EMT meetings that we've had because we really were focused on what the problem is and making sure that we're solving the right problem. That is how you build team success. And that kind of example might just seem like, oh, well, that's what teams do. But a lot of teams don't do that stuff. A lot of teams don't say the things that need to be said, or they want to sweep problems under the rug, or they don't feel safe speaking up. And so don't let yourself think that it doesn't come from building really great relationships. That kind of conversation is only going to happen because of strong workplace relationships. And I like that example because it's just a day to day thing. It's not something that is big and profound and going through some big transformation, which, of course, strong relationships is required for all of that too. But it's just in those daily interactions where the work gets done, where the relationships get built, where the damage can also be done if not handled properly. So, the key takeaway from all of this is one, relationships are the backbone of effective leadership. You've got to build relationships as a leader. And two, when you build relationships with work, you create a culture where there's more meaning, where there's more fulfillment, and that will make you a stronger company no matter what. All right, so let's go into how to do this. How can you build strong relationships with your team, with your peers, with your boss? First, you've got to invest time. You've got to show genuine curiosity about your team members as individuals and not just as employees. Same with your peers, same with your manager or with your boss. There's no way to build a relationship if you do not invest time. So, how do you do this? Schedule one on ones with your team members, with your peers, and with your manager. If you are not checking in regularly, you are not creating those opportunities to get to know these people who are in your life and who are a very important aspect of your life, of your success. When you have these one on ones, you can ask questions. You can ask questions about their aspirations, their challenges, their ideas. And yes, you can do this with your boss, with your manager too. I love it when my team members ask questions about what's going on in my life, and it allows me the opportunity to share a little bit of myself because they're genuinely curious and concerned about me and understanding who I am as a person. So don't feel like you can't ask your supervisor, your boss questions too. That is about building those strong workplace connections. So regular interactions, ask questions, be curious, and get to know those people who you work with most closely. The second aspect of building relationships at work is to communicate authentically. And this means that you are showing up as your true self. Now, it doesn't mean that when you're in a bad mood and you're grumpy, that you're communicating authentically and lashing out at people because you don't feel good. No, that's just being a jerk. That's communicating and putting your baggage onto somebody else and not being accountable to how you're feeling inside. No, communicating authentically is to share parts of yourself, to ask questions, to be empathetic, to give advice or feedback when required. And communicating authentically is about listening, and it's about active listening, listening for understanding, not listening to respond. People want to know that you care about them and they want to know where they stand in the organization. And that is what communicating authentically is about. It's about being straightforward. It's about being honest. It's about being kind. It's about showing up as yourself. And it's about asking them questions, understanding where they are at, giving them the opportunity to talk, and you really listen. Be present. That is what communicating authentically is about. And how you do it is you make eye contact and you listen to what they're saying. And if you find yourself formulating a response, say, stop. I'm going to ask two more questions before I give my response to anything. Or leave your tongue on the floor of your mouth. It's really hard to talk when your tongue is on the floor of your mouth. So that helps you from wanting to blurt out what you want to contribute to the conversation and really listen. That builds relationships. The third aspect of building relationships is being consistent. Being consistent matters. If you've ever been around a person who is erratic, I don't like that word. For those of you who have been listening to this podcast or read my book, you know about the time I was told that I was erratic from an employee many years ago. People who are erratic, people who are unpredictable, who walk in one day and is in a great mood and who walk in the next day and can be cold and silent and grumpy or can fly off the handle at something that's little, that scares people. And it is not conducive to building trust. So being consistent matters. This is why I have the mantra of being a cool, calm, and collected leader, being an unflappable leader. When I show up consistently, people know that they can trust what my response is going to be. And that builds that trust. Being consistent also means keeping your promises and following through. As a leader, your word matters. As a human being, your word matters, but especially as a leader. If you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. You need to follow up. Your credibility is everything. And if you lose credibility because you make promises that you can't keep, then you are not being consistent. For example, let's say an employee asks for a promotion and you say, hey, I would like to see you do these things and we'll discuss it again in 3 months. If you don't discuss it again in 3 months, you lose credibility. In fact, if you're not discussing it every single month, checking in, saying, how are you progressing? How can I help support you? Showing that person that you are invested in their growth, then you're not being consistent. And then when you get to the end of that 3 months, if they've done everything that you've asked and you still don't do it, then you've made a promise that you can't keep. Don't do that. That erodes trust. That is not good leadership. If you don't think that person is ready for a promotion or that promotion isn't available in the company right now, be straightforward and honest and say, we can't do that right now, or this is not the path that we're on, or maybe in a couple of years we'll be able to create this type of position, but let's get you on a career development plan that helps you get to that when the time comes. That is being a straightforward leader. That's being consistent. That's an example of things that I think a lot of leaders have to face when an employee comes and asks for them for a raise or asks them for a promotion. It really matters on how you handle that. Number 4, celebrate wins. People want to be acknowledged for their accomplishments, big or small. And when you celebrate wins individually and as a team, it fosters camaraderie and it creates a more positive workplace. People know that you see them and everybody wants us to be seen. Everybody wants to be seen for what they bring to the company, the value that they're adding. So celebrate those wins, have fun, buy pizza, write a thank you note, send a Teams message that says, that was really fantastic. It's a big thing, right? Give people a day off. How do you celebrate wins to show people that you see them and that you appreciate the work that they're doing? That builds relationships. And then finally, number 5, be vulnerable. You've got to share your challenges and your experiences to humanize yourself as a leader. And this doesn't mean that you have to share your deepest, darkest secrets like I did when I shared about my substance abuse issues all of those years ago. But I will tell you that changed my relationships with the people I work with in so many ways that still have a profound effect, even though I shared it, gosh, I don't know, 15 years ago. Still today, it makes an impact on my employees because people can come and talk to me about things that they would never come and talk to a CEO about, like, hey, I have a substance abuse issue, or hey, I'm having this relationship problem and I need help. Being vulnerable allows you to create those relationships where you can connect with people and where people feel safe to be themselves and to make mistakes and to really own how they're showing up. So I highly recommend that if you're not comfortable being vulnerable, one, I've got a podcast and I'll share it in the podcast notes about vulnerability, but just practice with small things. It doesn't have to be something that's big, but it could be something like, hey, I remember a time early on in my career where I really struggled with this same thing too. And here is what the outcome was. Here is what I learned from it. It could be something as simple as owning a mistake, saying, you know what? I really screwed up there. I shouldn't have said that. And I'm really sorry. Those are all moments of vulnerability. And vulnerability is courageous. There has never been an act of courage that I have seen, that I have experienced, that I have done myself that didn't require some level of vulnerability. So if you want to be a courageous leader, you have to be vulnerable. And if you're a courageous leader who shows vulnerability, you will absolutely build relationships with people because people want to be able to connect with you. And let's face it, we connect in adversity and in the struggle. So it's okay to humanize yourself by sharing a little bit about yourself. So the takeaway from all of this is that building relationships is about showing up authentically, like being your true self, not being afraid to be vulnerable, being consistent so that people understand what they're going to get when they're interacting with you, to invest the time, to be curious, to get to know people as individual team members, and to make your team feel valued because you are showing them that you care and that you're celebrating those wins with them along the way. Okay, so now let's dive into the third part of this podcast, which is how to navigate difficult or damaged relationships. Because let's face it, not all relationships are easy. Some of them are difficult and some of them are damaged because of things that we have done in that relationships or because something that somebody else has done in a relationship. But we can't stick our head in the sand with difficult or damaged relationships. We can't ignore them. We really have to lean into it. And I have learned that you can dramatically improve difficult relationships through communication, through time, through getting to know people and letting some things go. So if you have a damaged relationship or a relationship that you really struggle with, here's how I handle it. So the first thing is to acknowledge the issue. Recognize when a relationship is struggling and take responsibility for your part in it. I love this quote from Brene Brown who says, "You don't build trust by avoiding hard conversations." This is so true. So if there is a difficult relationship that you're having, just be honest with it. You can say, "Hey, I really want to talk to you about this and it's not going to be an easy conversation for me to have, but I want to share how I'm experiencing this relationship." And then share your experience. And that phrase, "this is how I am experiencing blah, blah, blah," whatever you say, is such a great phrase to use that reduces the chance that that person's going to get triggered. Now, you're not responsible for the other person's trigger, but how you show up in the words that you say matter. And when you say you do this, that is very confrontational and it can trigger somebody. But when you say, "This is how I'm experiencing this and I'd like to talk to you about it," it opens up the conversation for dialogue. So don't be afraid to acknowledge the issue. In fact, you should. If there's something that you did to damage the relationship, own it. If you are struggling with the relationship because you have two different ways of communicating, which can cause conflict, or you don't understand each other, own that and acknowledge it. Again, remember Brene Brown's quote, "You don't build trust by avoiding hard conversations." When you go into this conversation to address and acknowledge the issue, seek to understand. We use the phrase "seek to understand" at Stone Age so much. And that really means having an open conversation to understand the person's perspective. I just used this the other day, actually, with a CEO who I advise, and I'm also on the board of their company. And he was dealing with an issue at work. And he called me up and wanted some advice on how to handle it. And I said, well, have you asked any questions? Have you, seek to understand yet before you're making all of these assumptions? And he's like, no, I haven't. He had told himself all these stories about what was going on. I was like, well, do you know if any of that is true? Like, have you asked? And he's like, no. So the next day he went in, he asked a bunch of questions. He got a lot of clarity and he called me back and he said, oh my gosh, my story was wrong. And I shouldn't have taken this situation personally. And it's amazing what happens when you just ask questions. So seek to understand. It allows for a dialogue. It allows for you to really know if there is a real issue or what that other person thinks. And it gives you an opportunity to understand when you might have to modify yourself as well. And when you're seeking to understand, avoid blame. Just get the words, you do this, you do that, out of your vocabulary when you're seeking to understand. Truly just ask questions and learn what the other person is thinking. You can use phrases like, I notice, I feel, I'd like, I'm experiences to keep the dialogue constructive. The next thing you do with a difficult or damaged relationship is you've got to rebuild that trust. And that just takes time and that takes consistency and that takes effort. So you've got to show that commitment to repairing the relationship through consistent positive actions or interactions. So you have a conversation, you understand what the issue is, you've acknowledged it, you've asked a bunch of questions. Now you've just got to do the work to rebuild the relationship. And that means not avoiding it. That means talking. That means going into that person's office weekly and having a conversation. That means having check ins. That means smiling. That means building the relationship, getting to know that person. Show that commitment to repairing the relationship. That will help you fix the damaged relationship. And then finally, know when to just let go. Sometimes reconciliation is not possible. Maybe it's just oil and water and it's not going to work. But you can still maintain professionalism and you can still set boundaries. I'm going to only communicate with this person about these things. I'm always going to be professional. I'm not going to let myself get triggered because I own when I'm triggered. That's not the other person's responsibility. So I'm going to take those deep breaths and I'm going to choose to not take something personally and let it go. And I love Mel Robbins. She is a keynote speaker, an author. She's on the board of my publisher, Amplify Publishing. Hopefully, I can get her to come onto the podcast someday. She has a new book out called Let Them. And the premise is that sometimes you just have to let people be who they are. And in fact, when you just let people be who they are, you can have such stronger relationships. For example, I have a person in my life who has Asperger's, who's on the spectrum, and he can do very jarring things like you're in the middle of a sentence and he gets up and walks away. And those things used to bother me. I thought they were rude. But then once I realized that's just who he is and it's not actually about me and I'm just going to let him be him, it changed the nature of my relationship. Instead of getting annoyed, I just kind of giggled and was like, yeah, okay, yep. All right, good. I guess that conversation's over. And then just move on. And it allowed me to really build this really fantastic relationship because I just let him be him, right? I'm not going to change him. We are not going to change anybody. So then you just have to let them. And then the other aspect of let them is let me. And Mel talks about this in her book. Then I get to decide how I want to show up in those relationships. So for this example, when I just said, okay, I'm just going to let him be him, I decided that the way I was going to show up was just not take it personally. And you can make all kinds of decisions in that let me, but you still are just letting it go and you are letting that person be that person. And then let me is about setting those boundaries, being professional, deciding that you are going to be consistent in the way you show up and you're going to be cool, calm, and collected, even in the face of dealing with a difficult person or a damaged relationship. So, the takeaway from all of this is that struggling relationships absolutely can be repaired with honest communication and effort, but it does require a mutual willingness. You can't be the only person who wants to try to fix a relationship. The other person has to engage too. If they don't, that's when you let it go. But it's worth the effort. It's worth having the conversation. Again, remembering Brene Brown's quote, you don't build trust by avoiding hard conversations. Lean into it, try, and most times relationships will improve. All right, that is it for the podcast. I'd like to just recap the key points, which we're going to put up here for you to see. Number one, relationships are essential to trust, respect, and fulfillment in leadership. It's very important that you prioritize relationships. Number two, leaders can build meaningful relationships through authenticity, empathy, and consistency. Own how you are showing up. And then finally, number three, struggling relationships can often be repaired through open communication and accountability as long as you have the conversation. So don't avoid them, lean into them, value those relationships, even if they're hard. So, my ask of you in all of this is to reflect on one relationship that you can strengthen this week and invest in it. What team member do you need to get to know better? What peer do you need to build a stronger relationship? Do you know anything about your boss? And do you have that good relationship that makes you feel good? You are accountable for your relationship. So lean into it and think about that. What's one relationship I can strengthen this week? And what am I going to do to invest in it? All right. With that, I will leave you to your day. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this episode and you think that someone who values strong workplace relationships or who is struggling with workplace relationships could benefit from it, please share it with them. You can do that on YouTube, on your favorite podcast platform, from my website. And of course, if you liked Reflect Forward overall, you can share the overall podcast. You can write a review. You can subscribe to it on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. And if you want to learn more about all of this, you can visit my website, which is kerrysiggins.com. My book is there, The Ownership Mindset, or you can connect with me. LinkedIn is the best place, but of course, I'm on Instagram and TikTok too. So I hope you have a fantastic day, and I look forward to hosting you next week. Thanks.